On this simulcast of the Dieselpunk podcast and the Fedora Chronicles radio show, John Pyka, Larry Amyett, and I, Eric Fisk, discuss the fourth and final season of Man in the High Castle from Amazon Prime, and how these episodes made Man in the High Castle become one of the best science fiction series of all time. As good as the Battlestar Galactica reboot on the Sci-Fi Channel? Maybe so. But first, John, Larry, and I catch up on life in general and discuss how so many dieselpunks seem to love the same things such as film noir, true crime, and more. Don't forget to find the Dieselpunk podcast everywhere you get podcasts such as Apple's iTunes, Stitcher, Player FM, and more. And you can find the Fedora Chronicles on our website, thefedorachronicles.com, with pop culture and current events through the perspective of film snobs and dieselpunks, with topics ranging from true crime, paranormal, conspiracies, and more. Look for the Fedora Chronicles and the Dieselpunk podcast on social media, such as Twitter and Facebook. Once again, it's the Dieselpunk podcast, Fedora Chronicles, Man in the High Castle series roundup. Stay tuned.
Hey there, guys and gals, all you hepcats, cool kittens, diesel-powered disciples of cool. I jumped right in there, Eric. How you like that?
I just love the way that you just take control whenever there's a microphone in front of you.
It is my nature.
It sure is.
It's in my DNA. And for all of our listeners, you are listening to a simulcast of the Fedora Chronicles and the Dieselpunk podcast. And of course you recognize Eric Fisk's voice, but Eric, I'm so super excited.
I am jazzed for this. I'm jazzed for this for two reasons. You go ahead first.
Because joining us through the magic of the internet, the co-founder, the Diesel Pope, the professor of Dieselpunk, the one, the only, the man, the myth, the legend returns, and the crowd goes crazy for Larry Amyett.
Hey, it is great to be back. Thanks for that welcome, Johnny. That was really cool.
Johnson, just came to me.
John's in a good mood tonight.
Actually, I'm in a crappy mood.
Oh, okay. So
I'm in a combative mood.
All right.
Not with you guys, but when I get a little bit on edge, maybe I'm at my best when I'm on edge.
Yes, you are.
I'm on edge tonight. So listeners beware. Yeah. I cannot be held responsible for anything I say or do.
And that makes for great pod. That's the thing right there. Because when you are edgy, it just I don't even know how to describe it. There's an energy, there's a spark, a crackle. There's a tension in the air, and it was just like I'm like, get him, Johnny, get him. So, anyway, let me just do a little just self-promotion here, because I really wanted to start the show with this before we get to the topic du jour. One of the things I have noticed, and if I'm wrong, tell me. One of the things that I've noticed that our fans all have in common, they love dieselpunk. They love classic film and film noir. And I just realized this very recently. They also like true crime and unsolved mysteries. And maybe the realm of the paranormal.
Mm-hmm. I agree completely.
I would agree with that. I've always been fascinated in the paranormal, specifically cryptozoology.
Yep.
But you and I have talked about this, Eric. I've had my own experiences with UFOs, and for the last 6 months, I've been leading tours of downtown Nashville, doing haunted pub tours, taking groups of people around to the haunted locations in Nashville. And, before 6 months ago, I didn't know really what I believed. But in the last 6 months, I've been touched, pushed, grabbed, and scratched, and not by desperate women looking for a date.
I would have to say, John, that probably only 10% of them are, because, look, I don't swing that way, John, but you are an attractive man. You got to give yourself that. So probably give yourself some credit. It probably is 10% randy women. Can you give yourself that?
I maybe.
Okay. All right. Oh, that's great, because one of the things that I have also started since we last spoke is I'm doing a series of episodes for my podcast called True Crime One-on-One, where I sit down and I interview people who do investigative journalism into true crime authors and true crime podcasters. And I'm amazed at how nice and friendly these people are. Not friendly as the ghosts that you've encountered. I haven't had my butt pinched yet. But it's probably still on the horizon. But it's something that's I'm excited about the things you're doing just as much as I'm excited about what I'm more excited for you, John. I love your outfit. I love the energy that you're putting into these ghost pub crawls. Everything you're doing is magic right now. And I got to ask you, what's your secret? What's new? What's changed?
Necessity.
There you go.
So, I shared this. I've shared with you quite a bit.
Right.
And Larry, you've not been in the loop as much, but for the last, 16, 18 months, I've been under pretty vicious attack from the local, a small group, but very vocal group of people in the Nashville community, in the con scene, in the geek culture community, in the burlesque scene. And they went after me at work, got me fired from a job. They got me dropped from my publisher, Pro Se Productions. They dropped me. And now they've gone after me at House of Cards. And when I lost that day job in, I guess it's been May now, and there's been other stuff that has happened and calamities that have arisen out of their voxing campaign of me. But when I lost that day job, I needed to find something to make extra money because unemployment only pays so much. So a friend of mine was leading these ghost tours, and she said, "Hey, why don't you come do these for a couple of weeks until you find something else? You'd be great." And so I did, and I thought, okay, this is going to be a couple of weeks, and turned out I loved it, and I stayed on, and I got inspired. Out of tragedy can come great inspiration, and so I got inspired and started writing again the second volume of the new Tales from the Decoverse. We announced this a couple of months ago, Eric.
Yeah.
Tales from the Decoverse was initially going to be, just an anthology, but it's going to be so much more than that. The shared Dieselpunk universe. And I've got a new publisher. We're going to finalize everything this week. And so I got inspired to start writing volume 2 of my own series that will be part of the Tales from the Decoverse series of books. And as I was writing it, these paranormal experiences kept coming to the forefront, and they snuck into the book. And all of a sudden, I had written a story that will end Volume 2, but will be the beginning of Volume 3 with a new timeline created. The League of Impossibilists are the premier peacekeeping force on the planet, and throughout the day-to-day operations, a chronal rift opens, and out steps a future version of my character who has obviously come from a post-apocalyptic future and is wielding a lot of magic paraphernalia. And, my character says to my character, "Hey, who are you supposed to be? Big Daddy Voodoo?" and he clocks himself and says to the rest of the Impossibilists, "The veil has been torn wide open. Cthulhu is rising. Follow me." And that's how the second volume of the series is going to end.
Wow. That sounds cool, Johnny.
Yeah.
Pretty awesome. Pretty awesome stuff.
Yeah, so the inspiration of necessity, or necessity brought about inspiration, and that's what I'm doing. And you know what's really funny, Eric, is that when all of this really went down, starting in March, is kind of when everything came to a head, I threw my hands up and I said, all right, screw it. I'm out of the geek community. I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, people are calling me more now to come entertain, MC, and do panels at their cons than ever before.
Yeah.
It's the weirdest thing.
I think if I can speculate, if I can speculate on a hypothesis here.
Sure.
I think it was last year or the beginning of this year. I wrote about toxic fandom, and
yes,
and how there's never been a better time to be a fan of geek stuff, nerd stuff, as it were. There's never been a better time to be a geek. Why are we so angry? How can we hate everything? And not only that, is that you have to hate everything for the right reasons as well. Or there's going to be people who's going to go on a campaign to get you removed from the nerd groups. And you've posted some things that have been controversial. Your honest, genuine opinion about how toxic fanboys and a few toxic fangirls are ruining fandom, only to find yourself suspended or banned from some of these groups. One of them, I think you even started, and I became a pariah.
That's right.
I became a bit of a pariah when I started to mention. I've made some observations on what's killing fandom, and I've been threatened from being kicked off of these groups. I said, here's the thing. I didn't make the public announcement the way you did. I didn't say to everybody, no, I'm done with this. I'm done. I just quietly left. And I am like every day, and this is not a joke. This is not an exaggeration. Every day I get somewhere between 3 to 5 invitations back into some of these groups, and maybe twice, 3 times a week, I'm invited to moderate or admin some of these groups where I have said toxic fandom is ruining fandom. I think the worm is starting to turn. I think that people are starting to look at toxic fans, and they've really sort of had enough.
Yeah, I think there is definitely a realization now that it is a problem. And, Larry, you've not been part of these conversations over the last 6 months, but, our friend, Mr. Sakowicz.
Yep. Yep.
Is it Sakowicz or Sakovich?
And I think it's Anthony Sakovich, yes.
Yeah. And was he a Steamposium or Steampunk World's Fair?
He was Aethertopia.
Ethertopia.
Yep.
He was a victim of his own groups turning on him and doing the Julius Caesar to him.
Yep.
We've seen Vic Mignogna, the voice actor, just pummeled in the public eye over false allegations. And lo and behold, I've heard from other people now that it's happening to them. Just this past weekend, I was the guest on a very popular Star Wars podcast, about 2 million listeners, and I found out that they have experienced the same thing, even to the loss of sponsors and being blacklisted among certain circles. And it's just insane. It's insane. Listen, if you don't like someone's opinion, just turn it off. Go find something else. You don't need to campaign to cancel someone and affect their livelihood. You're messing with my coins. You're messing with my family's ability to thrive and survive. You're taking food out of my kid's mouth. And if you think I'm going to just lay down and let you do it, you got another thing coming.
Well, first of all, you know that you have a friend in me, and there's a lot of us who support you. And if for whatever reason you have to name names, name names. But I'm also going to tell you, John, I think that you've been more than fair with these people. I think that you've been too nice.
Well, here's the problem. Here's the problem, Eric. They've attacked me through fake profiles, anonymous email accounts. I don't have any hard proof on who the specific people are. I have a general idea, but I can't prove it. And that's what we're working on right now.
Yeah.
I've got some investigators involved, and my attorney is now involved. And there are 2 people that we know that did post publicly that we've got screenshots of. And we're going to put the screws to them first in hopes that they will turn over the rest of the cohorts.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Because
when the time is right, I will name names.
One of the things that I also wanted to add here, as far as Vic Mignogna is concerned,
Yes.
As a disclaimer, I have no idea what really happened. I have no clue. I've never met Vic. I've never spoken to him. I know so little about anime, it's not even funny. I am familiar with Vic's work with his Star Trek Continues.
Yes.
It's one. Yeah, I'm familiar with his work. And I liked what he did with Star Trek Continues. But for whatever reason, and mostly it's because of you, I followed this case and I've watched the depositions. The entire problem that I have with this, I've heard claims about Vic. I have no idea if they're true or not. And I'm giving Vic the benefit of the doubt. And here's the reason why. I watched one of his accusers in her deposition that was released on YouTube. She's really having way too much of a good time with this. She's laughing, she's smiling, she's giggling, she's teeing. And on the other side, you see Vic in his deposition. He is destroyed. He's distraught. He is like genuinely remorseful. And I've said this in other. one mistake does not mean that you get deplatformed forever. You should not be ruined forever because of a mistake or a few mistakes. We are all human beings. I'm telling you, the people who are accusing us of doing stuff without even doing anything, all I am, look, I'm a big mouth. I'm opinionated. I have something to say, and I've said it. And I'm a bad guy. You, in your situation where you are, you had an opinion. You stated an opinion. The accusations against you are ridiculous. I have known you for a couple of years, and I was a big fan of your work for years before that. I have never heard anything about you that is at all below board. There's not a single person who has come forward to me and said anything about you that's negative. Now, there are other people, and here's the thing. I think we spent way too much time on this last year and earlier this year. People came to me through the steampunk community, and they told me about a certain individual and what he was doing. People volunteered information to me about what steampunk Harvey Weinstein was doing. If you have done what people have said that you have done, don't you think people would have told me about this beforehand? I don't know if I've lost you guys.
No. I was waiting to see if that was a rhtorical question.
No, is it? But here's the thing. People volunteer information to me, Johnny. People volunteer information to me because of my work with the steampunk community, the dieselpunk community, the film noir community, now the true crime community. Not a single person has said, hey, Eric, this is something that you ought to know about your friend John. Not a single person. But in the steampunk community, even before the accusations that were posted on the Owl Eye View blog, I was hearing about this other guy in the steampunk community and the horrible things that he was doing that ranged from sexual harassment, possible sexual assault, and malfeasance in the business, in the convention community. I would have thought that if you had actually done these things that these people are accusing of, I would have heard about it sooner.
Well, I just stated an opinion and stood up for someone that I thought was wrongly accused, and that was enough to get me get a target on my back. But anyway,
we're not here to really talk about that, though.
No, yeah, we got bigger fish to fry.
Yeah. So, I think that from Larry's
not here to rehash the past either.
No, I think we put Larry to sleep
I
for a
feel
second.
for you guys. I'm sorry. I hit, and my heart's going out to y'all. Listen to this. And to be honest with you, though, at the same time, I'm going, oh, thank the gods I'm not part of the geek community. I have been so outside cosplay and conventions for years now, and the more I hear, the less I want to go back.
Well, you're a blessed man, Larry.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. All right, folks.
So we are here to talk about Season 4 of the greatest dieselpunk sci-fi television series of my lifetime. Is that putting it too heavy, too much of a broad brush? I am talking, of course, about Man in the High Castle, specifically Season 4. And I'll just tell you guys my first observations, and then we can dive into some of the specifics. I had a love-hate relationship with this show through seasons 1, 2, and 3 because I loved it, but I hated it because of the way it made me feel.
Yes.
Because I liked John Smith a lot. I found myself rooting for him. I found myself relating to him and having to continually tell myself, wait a minute, he's a Nazi.
Mm-hmm.
And this season, I never felt like that once.
Right.
I did not really. I had no love for John Smith this season, and it really comes to fruition in episode 9. And
let me interrupt.
Okay.
I don't want to be rude. I want you
Okay.
to finish your thought. Please hold that thought. Listeners, there's going to be spoilers out the wazoo in this episode.
Yes.
So if
Thank
you haven't finished it, might want to consider, I don't want to tell you to go away, but you might want to go away and come back and join us after you finish it. Because unless you don't mind having spoilers, just FYI, heads up, there's your trigger warning. Now let's go back. Continue, Johnny. I want to hear your
episode 9, and we'll talk about the big turn in episode 9. The whole time I'm thinking to myself, as they're, preparing to pounce on Smith in Berlin, I'm thinking, how in the world is he going to get himself out of this?
Mm-hmm.
And the end result is what I predicted would happen throughout all the seasons, but how it happened, I really didn't see coming, and it really surprised me. But then the final episode, the way it ended, left me scratching my head.
Oh, I thought it was just me. Oh, I'm glad to hear that.
And the first reaction I had was like, wait a minute, what? And then my second reaction was, wait a minute, why?
Right.
And we can talk about that more as we get there. I don't want to shoot the whole wad, but
Right.
Larry, what was your impressions of season 4?
Well, okay. You mentioned about not liking John throughout, and feeling bad because they made you like John in seasons 1 through 3. I thought this really brought the humanity back to John, how he's been in denial, and we saw that with the flashbacks to 46.
Yes.
And that night in the barracks, or in there on the on base housing with him and his wife, and the one that ended up being Jewish. And then when he passed him in the van and he was being taken away, and John's reaction, and even more so when John came to the alternate reality. I don't know if it's ours, but it's an alternate reality, and met that same friend, and how it just ripped him apart, the guilt of what he did and has been doing all these years. I thought that was great, and that made a lot of sense with his journey from beginning to end. I thought that was really good. I thought the West Coast was believable, how the Pacific states got freed. I thought that was really, really good, because I was going, how are they going to get this out? I mean, why would they leave? But Japan really had a very narrow agenda with attacking the U.S., and that was very much in keeping with the prince in character, the emperor. That was very much in keeping with him and the princess. Knowing the details of history. But like you, I loved the last episode. And before I get that, episode 9, I'm about to jump into that too. I'm not going to go there. We'll save that. So anyway, my impressions, I loved season 4. I loved season 4, and I loved the development of the characters throughout it. Eric, what's your thoughts? What do you think about season 4?
I thought there's an aspect to season 4 that I thought was a little rushed because they had so much to do and in such a short time to do it. I sort of felt like the pacing of this season was much faster than the previous seasons, which, I mean, and I loved and I adored. The thing that I think that is important for people to realize is that with the first 3 seasons, we really never understood how John Smith became a Nazi, other than there was only one flashback in one of the previous seasons where John Smith and his wife were, in a hotel in a suburb. I'm not sure if it was a hotel or was in one of the barracks, one of the officer barracks, in one of the suburbs of Washington, D.C. And they see the atomic bomb go off over Washington, D.C. that essentially ended the war. And that's all we saw of John Smith's past. I think that's really sort of the only flashback that we had. We never actually saw the process. What was the decisions that were made? Why did John decide to join the Nazis and become the leader of the American Nazis in all of Man in the High Castle? And in this season relied very heavily on the flashbacks of John and what happened to John after the dropping of the atomic bomb and the choices that they had to make to merely survive after America lost World War II in this alternate reality. And his decisions was, and I don't want to overstate this because this was a huge part of the theme of this season. You make one bad decision, it takes you on a road, it takes you on a path, and you don't know how to get down. You don't know how to get off that path. You don't know how. You don't know. You made this one decision, and here you are, and you're on the speeding locomotive, and you know this locomotive is going to crash eventually, but you don't know how to get off the train. And it just gets faster and faster. You get swept up on it. And then you're you get into this delusion. This train's not going to crash. This ride's going to last forever. And this also alludes to what also happens later in this episode, where the people around him are forced to, his family, his wife and his daughters, are forced to make decisions that people shouldn't have to make. He put his family into the situation they're in. And one of the things that I had, and I spoke about this in the podcast before Thanksgiving on the Fedora Chronicles radio show, because Jason and I had talked about this a little. Whereas sometimes dads get so hung up in building legacies for their kids, they forget to have relationships with their kids. And the thing is, they forget the reason why they're doing what it is that they're doing. I bring up my dad. And I brought up my dad and how my dad he was obsessed with this idea of becoming a big name and a big shot. He wanted to be somebody important in the realm of electrical engineering and ham radio. But the thing is that he was also a bit of a bum to his kids and his 2 wives. I'm not saying that my dad was a Nazi, but I did see a lot of my dad in John Smith, or I saw a lot of John Smith in my dad. Whereas I got to do this thing. I'm doing this thing for the family. I'm doing this. And here's another thing. I also, and it just had occurred to me, I also saw a lot of Walter White, a.k.a. Heisenberg, in John Smith. Whereas you're doing, because first of all, you start doing this thing for your family. You got to take care of your family. Whether it's joining the Nazi party in this alternate reality after the Germans and the Japanese won World War II, or you're cooking up meth to leave some money behind for your wife and your 2 kids. And then it gets to the point where you get into empire building. I got to build an empire. and this and after you forget the original reason. And John Smith forgot about his family, and he had to go to an alternate reality. I'm not convinced that reality is our reality, where John Smith saw the version of himself who became an insurance agent, salesman, and the best in the region, so that he could provide for his family, but he still had time for his family. He could still have a relationship with his son. And with some of the things that his son had said in the conversations, what his son from the alternate reality, what Abendgrubenführer's son in our reality said to him, saying, "You taught me about these things matter. You taught me that country matters, honor matters. All these things are important. And now you're telling me that it's all BS? I don't believe you. What happened to you?" And his son from our reality doesn't realize that his dad, and how would he know? He didn't realize that his dad was not really his dad. It was an alternate reality version of his dad. And I thought that was very poignant. And I think that was a message to dads everywhere about, priorities and getting your life straightened out, getting your head on straight. Because it would be very easy for any of us to become Abendgrubenführer John Smith. And here's the thing: the series, this season was not only about John Smith. And John, do you want to talk about Juliana Crane?
Well, so actually, while you were talking about John Smith, I was thinking about Chief Inspector Keto.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
So we're dropped into the season 1 year after the end of season 3, and if you'll remember, at the end of season 3, John Smith he's coming in, we think, to interrogate Juliana Crane, but he's coming in to kill her. And she has figured out how to use Tagomi's technique of the what is it? Not what is that meditation technique called? The I Ching?
Yes.
The I Ching.
Yes.
I Ching's okay, go ahead.
But no, correct me, Larry.
It's a divination technique.
Okay.
It's not meditation, but go ahead.
But Tagomi figured out how to use the I Ching to teleport, to travel to different dimensions. And Juliana has been studying his writings and his journals, and she finally, at the end of season 3, she goes into this meditative state, and just as John Smith pulls the trigger to execute her, she travels to another reality. She's still shot in the shoulder, but she survives. But that's not where this episode started. This season started with the assassination of Tagomi. And it's been 1 year later after that event with Juliana Crane, and Tagomi is assassinated. That's the first thing that happens, which broke my heart, to tell you the truth. He was one of my favorite characters, and that the actor is just so phenomenal. Just loved him. But that sends Inspector Keto on really not just a career-changing journey, but a true life-changing journey where he has to question his loyalties. There comes a time where the wrong person is accused of the assassination plot and attempt, and he knows it, and he can either keep his mouth quiet and serve the Empire with honor, or he can stand up and say, no, he's innocent. The real killer is you. and everything changes on a dime.
Mm-hmm.
But whereas John Smith did things for his family, basically what we see in this season is that all throughout this series, John Smith has been trying to serve his family by advancing himself, by building himself up. And in this season, Inspector Keto realizes that he's put country and duty before his family, and it's failed his sons, one son in particular. And Keto literally sacrifices his own life, trades his life for his sons. And it is such a remarkable arc and such a profound change in that character. For those of you who haven't watched it, spoiler alert, Keto's son, who is a decorated war veteran of the campaign in Manchuria, but struggles with post-traumatic stress disorder and just guilt over what they did, finds himself addicted to drugs and in servitude to the Yakuza. And the leader of the Yakuza, I can't remember his name, but the gangster that we've seen all throughout the series, basically makes a bargain with Inspector Keto. And Keto, in exchange for the Yakuza releasing his son to go back to Japan, pledges himself to become the right-hand man of the Yakuza, and to signify his loyalty, cuts off his pinky finger. Anyone who's studied anything about the Yakuza, that's a very common ritual that shows humility and devotion, and it's kind of half punishment, half initiation, and what a change for him. But we're dropped into this season a year later, and what really came out of nowhere for me, Larry, was the Black Communist Rebellion.
No.
Yeah.
Because I don't remember them from any other previous seasons, and all of a sudden, here they are. Now, we didn't get any kind of context or background on how they had formed over the last year. We're just kind of dropped in the middle of their fight and their struggle against the Japanese on the West Coast.
Well, that made perfect historical sense. Again, they really got the West Coast, the whole Pacific states. I thought that was so logical, so realistic as to how it would have. Because if you think about African Americans during that time, and when you saw what they were studying and where they were coming from and what they were saying, it was very, very much exactly what you would have thought. And it was amazing also how they evolved. First they wanted a separate autonomous region, right? Just for blacks. They were very much black nationalists. By the time the last episode came about, they were multiracial. They were really governing. There was one scene where she's standing there and she has one man who's obviously Jewish with his little cap, and someone else, another man, a white man, with her, and they were working together. They were no longer this black nationalist group. I thought it was so cool. I knew it was going to be bad when they won, because I knew they weren't going, because everybody knew that Nazis were going to go, aha, now's our chance.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think that gets back to something I really want to talk about here in a little while, get you guys' opinion as to why John Smith's friend, I don't remember the commander's name, once he learned of John Smith's death, why did he pull back? Why did he pull back the attack?
Well, I've got an answer for that. But I'd
love to hear it, because I've been dwelling on that, and I've come up with an answer, then I discard it. So, what are your thoughts?
Well, we'll get to that in a minute.
Oh, we will?
Hold on to hold on to that.
I will.
So the problem I had though with the black communists is that we hadn't seen them or that I remember any reference to them in seasons 1 through 3.
True.
So for me, it just came out of nowhere, even if it was historically accurate. Now, the one problem I had, I loved those characters, by the way, and the woman who stepped up to become the new leader. I adored her. I thought her character arc was so great. She was so strong. It was such a natural progression. But the spoiler alert, the Black Communist Party or rebellion launches one major attack against San Francisco. But it cripples their entire pipeline of fuel up and down the West Coast. But it's one attack.
Well,
it's successful.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, on a dime, the Japanese throw up their hands and withdraw and pull out of the Pacific states. Now, I understand they were looking for an excuse to do that all along because they're waging a war in China, there was another front that they were fighting, maybe Russia, I forget, but there was some other wars happening over in Asia that were sapping their resources, and they needed to pull out to refocus on their homeland. But I just thought that was an awful quick turn and an awful quick decision.
They were on the verge of it in the first place, like you pointed out. You're correct. I got the impression that, we saw the San Francisco attack, but that there were simultaneous attacks all up and down the pipeline. Now, maybe I'm remembering wrong. And I think...
No, you're right. You're right.
I think it gets back to they read, especially the auctioneer, I can't think of his name, read the emperor correctly. They saw the emperor wanted out. None of the generals didn't want to end. It's kind of like at the end of World War II in real life, where the generals, after the second bomb, after Nagasaki, they kept wanting to fight. We're going to fight. We're going to fight house to house. We're just every man, woman, child's dead. Is how we're going to fight. Is what the general said. And the emperor said, nope, uncle, I'm stopping it right now. Against the will of the generals, the demands of the generals. And I think that's what we had here. The emperor was never crazy about this in the first place. When they first appeared in season 1 briefly, I think it was, the prince and the princess visited San Francisco briefly. They weren't crazy about the occupation. And I think they'd been wanting it out, and you hit it. They were spread thin, and they were getting their butts kicked by China, and I'm sure half a dozen other enemy nations that they were trying to take on.
Well,
and they cut the loss.
And they knew that they were weakened and a target for the Nazis. They knew that the Nazis were going to eventually come after them on the West Coast.
Mm-hmm. The only thing they knew that would save Japan, and it would be that they, they had nuclear weapons, and they knew that nobody was going to ultimately attack the homeland. But you notice at the end he said, "We'll leave if you promise to keep the oil flowing." Because remember, that was what got them into the war with us in the first place. It's FDR's embargo of Japan, oil embargo, and they needed oil to maintain their ongoing war with China. So that war had been dragging on with China. Wow. And the TV show would have been 15 years at least. They had to have been worn down. And China had so many bodies they could throw at them. They couldn't kill them fast enough.
Yeah. Larry, let me just intersect. What's wrong with me? Let me just interject here. James Bradley wrote an incredible follow-up. I think that he was also the gentleman who wrote the book Flags of Our Fathers. And the book Flyboys, A True Story of Courage, is an essential book for everybody who is into World War II history. It really gets into the background of how did World War II start with Japan? And oil was a huge part of it. Natural resources was a huge reason why Japan, the imperial industrial machine, was cranking at an unprecedented event. Because the thing is that Japan sort of saw the writing on the wall. If they were going to survive, and if they were going to compete in the global market, and succeed and eventually win, they had to start going after natural resources. They had to start securing natural resources so that they could grow to become an empire, and so they wouldn't get passed over and left in the 18th and the 19th centuries. And it's their aggression that caused FDR to and the rest of the Eastern global superpowers to put the brakes on their consumption of resources, which made them more aggression. It's their aggression or their perceived aggression that caused the world to say, hey, wait a minute, what are they doing? They're building this huge military industrial complex. We have to stop them. And so they did these, like you said, these oil embargoes. And then Japan had said, look at what the Eastern world is doing. They're trying to stop us. They're prejudiced. They're bigoted. They're biased against us. We have to get more aggressive. And it was the snowball effect that led to Pearl Harbor.
I completely agree with everything you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it is
everything you're saying. But their goal for attacking us was to free up the oil.
Absolutely.
And exactly right. That is exactly why FDR did the embargo. You're spot on. That's why he sent clandestine Marines to fly airplanes for the Chinese, which is how we got the Flying Tigers, who were in the midst of it long before we got involved. So, no, I hear you. You're spot on. And I didn't want to imply that FDR was wrong, but the motivation for Japan to attack us, besides the fact that they thought they should have owned Hawaii, being a Polynesian island, they really did not want to take over the U.S. And it was an occupation they didn't want in the first place. And I think they had a feeling we won't be able to hold this. And that's why I think that it after about 15, almost over, what was it? This is 63. They won 46, not quite 20 years. They were spread thin, and they were starting to pull back. I suspect, 5 years later, they probably would have pulled out of China, and probably would have been isolated back to the mainland. In 5 years, they were on they were backtracking.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's an interesting sounding book, Eric. Would you repeat the name of that again for us and for listeners?
I sure will. As soon as I reopen that window that I just closed for you. It's called Flyboys: A True Story of Courage by James Bradley. And just a little little blurb here. This acclaimed bestseller brilliantly illustrates a hidden piece of World War II history as it tells the harrowing true story of 9 American airmen shot down in the Pacific. One of them, George Herbert Walker Bush, was miraculously rescued. What happened to the other 8 remained a secret for almost 60 years. After the war, American and Japanese governments conspired to covering up the shocking truth. Not even families of the airmen were informed of what happened to their sons. Their fate remained a mystery until now. It is wow. It has a lot of background information, and it really gets into the mentality of the Japanese and how they did what they did, and their entire mindset, as it were. I think it's an important book for everybody who is into World War II history to read. Just as important is his other book, or his first book on this topic, Flag of Our Fathers. These are like 2 books. Oh. I read these 2 books back to back, and I thought that they were incredible, and it really gave me a much greater appreciation for the sacrifices that American servicemen and women made during that time. And I feel like we forgot John. John, this has been Dieselpunk Book Club. Would you like to share a book? Do you have a book you'd like to share with the book club?
Well, no. But while you guys were talking about that, I looked up the actress Frances Turner. She's the one who played Belle Mallory, who was who became the leader of the Black Communist Revolution. Phenomenal character, and loved her. And one thing that I wanted to kind of point out that I thought was very interesting. So, Inspector Keto really becomes a hero in my eyes. I really came to respect his character and really found myself cheering for him. But what was really interesting is the Japanese pull out of San Francisco. They pull out of the West Coast, and it leaves this vacuum. Yes, they're going to cede the territory to whoever can claim it. And the Black communists have kind of created this environment, but they haven't taken power yet. Mm-hmm. They're trying to figure that out, and in the vacuum of the Japanese leaving, all of this racial tension comes flooding back in. And we see these white nationalists now who are hunting down what they call the pawns, the Japanese, and not only that, but clashing with the Black communists. And at one point, they string up Keto to hang him. And I think his name is Leon, the character Leon, or Elijah. No, it's Elijah. He knocks them out of the way and cuts Keto down. He says, "There won't be no hangings, not on our watch," which I thought was so poignant and profound. That here in this alternate history, this oppressed people, this marginalized people, they are now being handed the reins of leadership, and they are pledging not to make the same mistakes and not to treat other people the way that they were treated. And I thought that was really beautiful.
I thought that was powerful as well.
I agree. I agree.
I think that one of the really most important aspects of the entire season, not just this season, but Juliana Crane as a character, and the actress, yes. Alexa Dalvaros. I think that she is a phenomenal character. And I just want to also interject here. There's something about her that, and I'm not sure if it was the makeup artist or whoever. She really sort of looked like she aged like 10 years throughout this series because of all the things that she had gone through. And I looked at some other recent pictures of her, and she doesn't look that much different than she did when in season 1 in some of the promotional pictures. But there's something about her in this season that looks very weathered and worn down. She served as the audience advocate, who is the one who we sort of looked at as she's the one who's kind of asking the questions that the audience would like to have answered. She's the one we saw through her. Like this is the alternate world. This is the alternate reality if the Allies lost, and she's the one who through her we see the first movie that came across from an alternate dimension. She's that we know of, that we see. And she's the one who says it doesn't have to be like this. The reality does not have to be this. There's an other way. And Juliana Crane is really the sort of like the catalyst for change throughout all of these seasons.
Well, you know, her real, I think, turning point moment was in season 3 when she slit Joe's throat. And you know, basically she made a commitment at that time that she was going to do whatever it takes, not only to survive, but to, you know, make that change. And, you know, I found it very interesting that, you know, she escapes at the end of season 3 by traveling to another reality where the Allies won, immersing herself in that lifestyle for a full year, becoming close once again with the Smith family. She and Helen are close friends.
Right.
Thomas is one of her students in the dojo. And I got the impression maybe even a co-teacher in the dojo.
Yeah.
And you know, what I found interesting was that she chose, rather than to stay there and protect what she had created for herself in that reality, when it was threatened, she chose to go back to her prime reality and change that instead. I don't think a lot of people would make that choice. I know she was being attacked, you know, across dimensions, and maybe she felt like she could never be safe unless I think she even said it, unless she kills John Smith. But she becomes, once again, just like Belle Mallory on the West Coast, Juliana Crane becomes the resistance leader in the Nazi, in the Reich. And that's why they had to age her. They had to give her gravitas. They had to give her that seriousness. They had to make her look tough enough to lead these guerrilla soldiers to bring down the Reich.
Yeah. And I think that the decision that she made was a difficult one. And yet, at the same time, this is going to sound crazy from me, because I want to talk just for a minute, a little bit about our reality in corporate America. I think that Man in the High Castle is probably one of the most important television shows in the past 10 years. And it really replaced in my heart replaced Battlestar Galactica, the Ron Moore reboot, because that really sort of captured my imagination while it was on. And it's hard to imagine that it's been 10 years since the finale of that show. The thing about it is that it was great drama, and it really sort of, and I'm talking about both Battlestar Galactica and Man in the High Castle, both of these TV shows really tackled very difficult, dark topics that mainstream television would not have touched unless it was maybe on something like AMC or one of the other cable networks. There's a lot of things that they could have done with Man in the High Castle, and I really felt as if they did a great job tying up all the loose ends and telling a lot of the stories. I think that they crammed 2 seasons of story into 1 season. But one of the things that I really wish that they had spent a lot of more time on is Nazis from their dimension crossing into other dimensions, wreaking havoc, and people hunting down, in our reality, hunting down those Nazis and trying to prevent them from destroying our reality or infiltrating our reality. And I think that there's a lot of metaphors that were going on. There's a lot of things that they were trying to tell us about modern society and modern politics that it wasn't overtly over the head. They weren't beating you to death with it. And I think that they did an okay job not proselytizing their point of view or evangelizing their point of view or trying to like make allegories to what's going on in the world today. And I know I'm stepping into it by saying that. But I think that it's like, I think that they missed an opportunity in future seasons to talk about some other issues that we have, especially when it comes to the idea of science and technology and moving too far and too fast and surveillance state. I also felt like they were going to make a big, huge statement with the Nazis' alternate realities, J. Edgar Hoover. I felt that they were really going somewhere with that. And it just, it turned out to be just a plot point for just the finale.
So I think you're onto something here. I think you are correct. I think this story probably was plotted out for 5 seasons, but they had to compress everything into this final season because one of the really disappointing aspects for me was that, you had Smith at the portal, that scene where he's meeting with the scientist, and they go into that room and he shows him the map of reality. Yeah. That was mind-boggling. Yeah. And he just kind of throws it away as, here's us and here's all the other branching realities. And, someday we will invade them and control them all. We visited this many and blah, blah, blah. Yep. And then it was forgotten. They didn't touch on that again really at all until the final episode. And even then, it was only from the aspect of Juliana Crane and Wyatt Price leading that team in an effort to destroy the portal. But we'll talk about what happened instead in a minute. But, I felt really disappointed that they didn't go more into the dimension travel. And, we talked about this on the live video podcast a couple of weeks ago with Corey and Dark Soul Robert, how initially I thought it wasn't just a dimensional jump, but there was also maybe some time travel elements. And then as we were talking through it, I realized that in this reality where the Nazis won, of course it seems like there was time travel because aesthetics stopped, right? Yeah. It's what we talk about in Dieselpunk all the time. The visual aesthetics, the style aesthetics stopped progressing. So when Tagomi in, I think it was season 2, when he jumps into, let's just say, our reality, right, it seems like he moves forward in time because in that reality where the Allies won, style and aesthetic progressed. Right. But it was the same time period. So I would have loved to have seen more glimpses of that. I would have loved to have seen more glimpses of other realities where the Nazis won and maybe where it had gone differently.
Right.
You know, what happens when this Nazi force invades another reality where the other Nazi force has won.
Yep.
And now they're clashing. So there's a lot of rich storytelling that could have happened that just they ran out of time for.
Well, I mean, all that would have been intriguing. I agree. And I guess the geeky side of me really goes, ooh, that sounds like fun.
Yep.
But from a storytelling, because remember, when all is said and done, it's really about the characters. You know, we geeks kind of get caught up in the technobabble and the cool spaceships flying and zooming and stuff like that, and we miss the core, which is the human storytelling.
Well,
so I hear you, man. I hear you, and you've been kind of cool. I kind of like the fact that they throw in occasional cool, weird Nazi idea of, like the rocket train. Okay.
Yep.
Which was based on some reality because the Soviets built something, a monstrosity that kind of looked a little bit like that. Everything was built, all the technology was built for keeping the empire, but that's another issue. You made a good point about something, Johnny, about culture and art advancing and how it stagnated in the Nazi system. Remember when Helen had to read that big giant book about architecture, and her aide said, "Oh, architecture?" And she said, "Architecture is not just about buildings." And that was the Nazi framework. Yeah. Everything advanced the Nazi idea. Everything. They were real totalitarians, and the true sense of the word.
Right.
As in total. And when you have that type of mindset and the squelching of it and the lack of intellectual and artistic freedom, you're going to see exactly what you pointed out, which is a great observation. It's stagnated. Artistic freedom is dependent upon the liberty of the artist. And the Nazis were going to make real sure there was no liberty of the artist because it was totalitarian and all art had to serve the state. So it stagnated. So that's a good observation.
Well, and also about that, I get why they didn't delve into the sci-fi as much, because you're right. It is a story about the characters, and the entire series, from the first frame to the final frame, is really a story about Juliana Crane and her hero's journey. The entire story is Joseph Campbell's classic hero's journey. The first face we meet in season 1 was Juliana Crane, and the final face we see in season 4 is Juliana Crane.
Yeah.
And in that hero's journey, you meet an unlikely hero who goes on a journey of discovery, leaves home, and that she did that. She left San Francisco. She fled to the Reich. She sought sanctuary. Then she literally, travels to another world. Along the way, she meets the mysterious stranger or the mentor who was Tagomi. And then, there's the demonta, the climax, where the hero wins the day, and then there's a new status quo. And we see that throughout Juliana Crane all throughout this series. And then each of the characters have their own, hero's journey. Like we were talking about Belle Mallory, Wyatt Price. You think about Wyatt Price, played by James O'Mara, who has become one of my favorite actors, by the way. He was a smuggler. he was the Han Solo of this story. And by the end of season 4, he is the field general that Han Solo became. And, you know, he is all in. He is willing to lay down his life for the cause. And but at the end of the day, and you know, Keto, he has that hero's journey. But at the end of the day, it's really all Juliana Crane's ultimate story, because she is the catalyst, and she is the hero in this series, which was a little bit frustrating for me in earlier seasons, because I really didn't pick up on that until this final season, because there were so many subplots going on and so many things interweaving. And all along in seasons 1 through 3, up until that moment, and well, even maybe a little bit after she killed Joe, I just felt like Juliana Crane made really bad decisions consistently. And I kept shaking my head at her going, "You're so stupid." And I felt the same way about Frank Frick. He did make stupid decisions. But you know, at the end of the day, those bad decisions that Juliana made, you know, made her who she would become. Does that make sense?
It really
does.
It does. I think there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things about this series that reminded me of a lot of other great series. I already mentioned Battlestar Galactica. One of the things that had also came to mind while watching this was the X-Files. And I didn't realize it until just a second ago, because the name Frank Spotnitz is one of the script writers for both the X-Files and Man in the High Castle. And there really was that sort of sensibility to the show. And there is this sort of like this what if this thing is reality? What if the worst actually happens? There were a lot of threads that I thought that were sort of like interconnected. And one of the things that the X-Files did sort of talk about, you know, on a couple of episodes, is like alternate reality clashing with our reality. And the whole notion of like, which is the real reality? Which is the correct timeline? And this is also something that, and I think, Larry, you had mentioned that you had also read the original book ages ago,
yeah.
Man in the High Castle. And one of the things that I appreciate about this show is that it is very different from the book. It did diverge somewhere, I think, in season 2.
It diverged the moment they showed John Smith, because he wasn't even a character in the book.
Okay.
It all takes place in the Pacific States.
Yep.
There's a few Nazis at the embassy, and the trade minister has a shootout with them at one point. Other than that, the Nazis have little or no role in the novella. It was so small.
Right.
And it's all Pacific States. It really was more because Philip K. Dick was really into Eastern mysticism at the time, and it was really more of a means by which he could share his thoughts about the I Ching and those type of subjects. Then I think it was really about speculation about the about any potential occupation of Western North America. And that's I think if you read the book, it's really more about that than it is about what we think of. So anyway, but yeah, very different. You're absolutely right. They are, I mean, night and day.
Yeah,
night and day. But you know what? You couldn't have made a series out of the book. You know, that'd be like what? making 3 movies out of The Hobbit. I mean, who would do that? I mean, hey, you know.
No, really, who would be so stupid as to try and make 3 books out of The Hobbit? You're right, Larry. You know.
Hey, you know.
I mean, what's going to happen next? David Lynch is gonna make a 2-hour movie out of Dune. I think that the consensus between the 3 of us, and if I'm wrong, you tell me. This was an awesome series. It's probably one of the best TV series that's come along in a long time, maybe even one of the best. But this season was far too rushed, and there was a lot of potential that they sort of left. They could have explored in another season or 2.
Well, so let's kind of pick back up on that. So, we've touched on Inspector Keto, Juliana Crane. There are a lot of characters throughout here, but, for me, up until this season, the character I was most interested in following was John Smith.
Right.
Who had, when we first meet him, he's Obergruppenführer. Are you impressed, Larry? I learned how to pronounce it.
Hey, not bad.
And then he became Reichsmarschall and then Reichsführer. And now in this season, spoiler alert, I knew all along that eventually he would succeed Himmler. That was the natural course that this story was taking. What I didn't expect is how it would come about and how it would happen. So in that year time jump, his wife Helen has basically been exiled to the neutral zone. She's escaped to the neutral zone, but John Smith allows it so that she can get space or keep her head straight or whatever. But he's stationed a squadron of SS guards around that ranch. So they're never out of his purview. But her exile, self-imposed exile, is causing him problems at home. And we learn that everyone in Germany knows that he's having problems with his wife. He's having problem with his kids. There's one point in this story where, you really feel for Helen. She's escaped and now she's pulled back in for the sake of her children. But, she does what she thinks is the right thing to protect her husband, making an appearance on television. And I was just smiling at that piece and just thinking, wow, what a great moment for her. And one of his daughters is sympathizing with the rebellion and questioning the Reich. And he's under all of this scrutiny and all of this pressure. And finally, Himmler summons him to Berlin. Doesn't invite him, summons him. And they're going to meet about what to do about the Western Pacific states and how they can conquer it and take it over. And it's really that's kind of like their side agenda. Himmler's real agenda is to get rid of Smith because he sees Smith as a problem, even though Smith would be the key to them taking over the Pacific states. And in episode 9, spoiler alert, John Smith makes a deal with the was it Reichsmarschall? I forget his name, but and basically they make a deal and assassinate Himmler and the entire cabinet in one fell swoop.
Yep.
And John Smith is given complete autonomy over the Reich, the United States of the United Reich states, whatever they call it. That's at the end of episode 9, and I was my jaw was on the floor.
Right.
Because I really didn't see that coming. But it showed again how cunning, how smart John Smith really was. And once again, his enemies have underestimated him.
Sounds familiar.
And they've paid for it with their lives. But here's where I really thought things would go in a different direction when we hit episode 10. You remember Smith's second in command, who he becomes Reich Marshal when Reich Marshal when Smith becomes Reichsfuhrer.
Right.
In episode 9, he says to Smith, "Listen, John, why are you going to Berlin? The Japanese have left all of these nuclear weapons here. We seize control of them. We are a new superpower. We can overthrow Germany. We can overthrow Berlin and take our country back." This is a senior officer in the Reich saying this. And you remember Smith is like, you could go to prison just for saying that.
Yep.
So let's keep that between you and I. And but you got the feeling that, especially through the flashbacks that Larry mentioned in episode 10, that John Smith was never really on board with the Reich, that he was fulfilling a duty to his family and doing what he thought it took to advance himself to protect his family, until he's elevated to Reichsfuhrer of the American occupation. And there's a dramatic turn in his demeanor, and I swear it was like that resistance to what had been going on vanished, and he suddenly embraced the Reich to the point that he was willing to execute millions of blacks, Jews, American Indians, Japanese, and others that lived in the Pacific states. Mm. And you'll remember his friend, and I wish I could find his name, and it's just escaping me. But Reich Marshal, he tells him, "John, whatever you do, I will follow you." And he's willing, even though he's had thoughts of seizing nuclear weapons, overthrowing Germany, even after all of that, when Smith is promoted, he's now the supreme leader of the American states. He's willing to follow him and follow his orders until he doesn't have to anymore. Mm. And of course, I am talking about what took me by complete surprise, guys. I really thought that this series would end with John Smith going through the portal and living happily ever after in an alternate reality and leaving the Reich behind him.
Oh, really?
I honestly believe
that's what
that too.
I thought the ultimate end would be. And episode 10 took that in a sharp turn left.
Yeah.
Because he does escape.
Well,
spoiler alert.
Yeah, he escapes
by killing himself.
The same way Hitler did. Yeah.
Yeah. He blows his brains out on the ridge, and the word comes down to Reich Marshal, who is now Reichsfuhrer. He's got a field promotion with the death of John Smith. Hey, John Smith is dead. And you see him take off the Iron Cross from his tie and lay it on the table. And he calls off the airstrike because now
the airstrike in San Francisco. Yeah, well, let's make sure that
that's right.
Yeah, the airstrike in San Francisco.
But what, John? I'm sorry. Why did he call it off? I saw it. Don't get me wrong. But what was his reasoning not to follow through? Because now he could own all of North America.
But
why stop it?
Because he wasn't a believer in the Reich.
Yeah.
He was just following along. Same reason Smith was, and his loyalty was to John Smith, not to the Reich.
Yeah, but they were no longer under the right. They had autonomy.
But John Smith was going to execute. He was going to destroy the Pacific states. He was going to be the cause of the death of millions of people. And you saw it bring Helen to her knees. She couldn't believe that her husband would do something so atrocious. And I'm telling you, Reichsmarshal was never on board with this plan. And the minute that he didn't have to be on board with it, he reversed course.
It's sort of like the American Nazis woke up and realized this isn't who we are. This isn't who we are. We don't bomb our own cities into submission here. This isn't democracy. This isn't what America believed in. And the idea that the American flag, this I thought was important. The American flag was considered contraband in certain parts of this alternate reality. Yeah, on the East Coast. And on the West Coast, when the black communists in San Francisco wanted to look for a symbol to rally behind, somebody had found an old American flag, and some of the blacks were saying, look, no, that flag's not done anything for me and my ancestors. And the leader of the black communists had said, listen, we need a symbol to get the former Nazis to join us in our cause and remind them who they used to be. I thought that was a very powerful moment.
That was. I agree. I would agree with that. Yes.
But for me, Larry, I agree with you on the point of why did they stop the airstrike on San Francisco as soon as John Smith died? For me, that's more evidence of the fact that they really had to sort of wrap the series up and kind of put like a happy face on the final season, because this entire series was really dark. It really went places that really shined a really ugly light on all of us and what could have happened if we're not careful. I mean that sincerely, and I mean that with love when I say that. The series really shined a light on aspects of ourselves that I wish didn't exist, and I'm happy and I'm sad about it at the same time. But there's a lot of things I mean this, and I'm adamant about this. The one thing that I am really disappointed about with this show is that it seemed way too rushed, and they had so much material for another season. And they have so much material for another spin-off series with like a team of people in our reality in the 1960s fighting off a Nazi invasion from that other reality. There's so much material there. I really sort of like, I hate to be a Debbie Downer. I really think that they missed a lot of great opportunities with this show.
I don't think they had much choice. I bet it was, I heard somebody once say about a different show that they ended it so fast it was like a show on CW that just got canceled. And I wonder if that's exactly what happened. Amazon may have simply pulled the plug and said, hey, you guys are expensive. We want to make more stuff. And, by the way, y'all need to wrap it up because this is going to be season 4 of the hit. Now, that being said, 4 seasons have kind of gotten to be the new standard. The way Star Trek originally, set 7 seasons to be the new standard for a while there. That was the standard with Next Generation and everything that followed, ending on 7 seasons. Then you mentioned Battlestar Galactica.
Right.
Well, it only went 4 seasons because they wanted to end while they were high. Okay, they wanted to end on a high note. And a lot of shows now seem to have a 3 to 4 season story arc to it. We never meant it to go beyond 4 seasons. That seems to be that they're worried it's going to jump the shark if they go on too far.
Well, I personally
be like Supernatural that keeps on going like the Ever Ready Bunny.
Right.
Yeah. Supernatural is on season 14, and you know, for me, I want a finite season or series. I want it to end with and have a definite ending. I don't want this series to go on forever and ever and ever, because you grow tired of it. You tune out. You feel like, oh, I can miss it and whatnot. Having a short series, 3 or 4 seasons, makes it must-see TV. You don't want to miss anything. And I agree with you, Eric, that it did seem a little bit rushed, especially episode 10. Let's think about this for a minute. In episode 10, not only does John Smith commit suicide, Helen dies in the train wreck. And that was almost a throwaway death. Like, it just happened. He mourns for half a second and then starts running to save his own life from the rebellion led by Juliana and Wyatt Price. But Larry, I want to know your theory about why Reichsmarshal called off the airstrike.
I've been trying to rationalize why he did. One thought came to mind is that he was just tired. He had all the Nazi hierarchy was gone. Now his best friend was dead. And he really wasn't, like you said, he was never really a Nazi per se. He was he thought himself a patriot, American patriot, he thought. And that he just wanted to end the bloodshed. That's the best I can come up with. I think Eric hit upon it. There was something. We don't want to go where this is going, so we're going to come up with a way of having a happy ending. I would have liked to seen him and John have a conversation, and it'd go, and he'll express that he didn't think they should attack the West Coast.
Well, but
that
see,
would
I think
have been perfect if he had said, do you really think we should do this?
I think that conversation did happen. I think that conversation did happen, but it was all in the subtext of their earlier conversation when he said, listen, we can become a superpower and we can fight against Berlin. We can get them out of our country and be one nation again. Yeah, I think he said all of that.
Now, I think he said, and I have to watch it again, I thought he said, we have nuclear weapons. We could be a superpower if all you have to say is we're it and they can't do anything to us because we have. I was thinking that the Nazis were so assured of their conquering of North America, and they wanted to make sure that they could nuke the Japanese if they wanted to, that they had the gall to place nuclear weapons in North America. Maybe whether they were ICBMs, whether they were bombers, whatever they were.
Don't you remember that Keto told Smith that they were leaving all of their nuclear resources in America? The Japanese are the ones who had the nukes.
Well, he asked, what are you going to do with the nuclear weapons? And I thought it's just the opposite. I thought he said, we're going to secure those. Wow, now I got to watch that over again. Oh, poor me.
Boo-hoo. Boo. I wish I had the time to watch it all over again.
Yeah, cry for me.
I do. Here's the thing. And speaking about having the time, and this is one of the things that I don't, because I mean now we're quickly approaching an hour and 40 minutes into this podcast. I think that something has changed in American television. And I think that we've reached the point where there's no going back. I don't think that we could ever go back to the time when there was just 3 networks and there could never be another MASH finale where everybody tuned in to watch the final episode of a TV show. I think that time has passed. I don't think that we're ever going to have a TV show that's a communal experience, except, and hear me out on this, I think that what all of these streaming networks have done is something that's very awesome and it's very scary at the same time. Like, I'm pleased as punch that dieselpunks all over the world have watched and enjoyed Man in the High Castle. And I really wanted to just watch the final episode and just really enjoy it and kind of mourn the loss of it, sort of. Like, really allow myself to digest it and really sort of like think about, like, what did I just watch? But the thing is that I went from one day watching the final episode of Man in the High Castle to the next day watching the first 3 episodes of Disney Plus's The Mandalorian. And now The Mandalorian has captured everybody's attention. I wonder if we're reaching a point where there's so much great TV that's on, but we don't have the time enough to watch it all. And maybe there's a part of me that's like looking for a controversy to talk about. Maybe this is a part of me that's being a little bit of a Luddite, saying that we've gone too far too fast. That's because that's the other thing that I've been thinking. I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot, especially at work. We don't really have the time to digest these great shows that we're seeing, because as soon as you got one show ending, as soon as you have like a Game of Thrones ending, now you have another episode of The Walking Dead, which I stopped watching after season 3. And we have all these like big, huge, we have the Stranger Things, and then we have Man in the High Castle.
Well, but Eric, the reason it seems that way is because the model of distribution has changed from weekly episodic releases to everything releasing all at once, and people feeling like they have to invest all of this block of time all at once to an entire series or an entire season. That's why I love what The Mandalorian is doing, and Disney Plus is committing to doing this with all of their series. They're going to release them one a week and on different nights of the week. It's back to old broadcast TV, where you had specific shows that you watched on specific nights, and I like that.
Right.
But one thing I want to bring up here before we run out of time, and that is something you said, Eric, where you felt like they rushed the end of the season in episode 10 and that they had to wrap everything up in a happy ending. And I'm going to submit to you, there was no happy ending in this series. And here's why I say that. Because just because Smith is dead and there's a new Reichsmarschall doesn't mean the struggle is over. There's a new war with Germany about to happen at the end of this season.
Uh-huh.
Not only that, but what left me scratching my head is the new status quo also includes all of these travelers coming through that portal into this world, and they're painting it like it's this big hopeful moment, like, oh, look at all of these travelers coming to join us. What are they coming to join? A dystopian nightmare. Why is this a good thing? And the series really leaves you having to answer all of these questions for yourself, which I kind of like.
Right.
I like it when shows do that and make you think and make you write the ending for yourself. But there's no happy ending in this series.
Now, one thing about the ending with with all these people that coming out, and Hawthorne walking, say, they kind of imply those are all the dead coming back, because he gets all excited with this big grin on his face, and he goes like he's going to go off and find his wife. But he points out that she was they were not together in any other universe. only in that universe was his
Right.
wife and he together. So, but he implies that he's going to go off and he's looking for his wife in the hope that she's going to come out of the light. It reminded me of the ending of Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Yes.
And they're all coming out of the UFO. Like, wait, deja vu all over again. No, I thought that was a very weak ending with the portal. Again, it gets back to what Eric said. Had to have a happy ending. But you still got Nazis run all over America. Just because they don't have a swastika around their necks, and doesn't mean that the Reich Marshal, that his generals are going to go, oh, well, he's not Nazi anymore. I'm not either. No, they've got all these true believers convinced about fascism. And is this going to stop being fascist? Well, one, they don't want to stop because a lot of people are going to string them up by the heels the moment that they get a chance, right? It's only a totalitarian state that's keeping them under control. So, no, that'd be suicide. There's so much left open, so much left empty. Up until that last episode, I was going, this is ending just the way it should.
Yeah.
And then, not in last episode, last 15 minutes. After John Smith died, to me, everything just went to hell.
But that was at the very end, though, Larry.
That's how, it was really, really great to me until the very last moment. Now, I admit, I don't know how they could have ended it in a positive way. I mean, it was one of those, blow up the Death Star again. It was one of those, how do you destroy an empire? Okay. When you're the only empire. I'm not sure how they could have had a satisfying ending, and what we all wanted to see, which was the end of Nazis. Okay?
Right, and that's where they left it open, right? But what if it had just ended with Smith blowing his brains out, Reich Marshal calling off the planes? You see the celebration of the black communists in the Pacific states. You see the kind of the relief of Juliana Crane and her rebels, and that's the end for me. Everything with the portal, at that point, I was just like, what has happened? And that's where I think, Eric, your point is on, has merit. That's probably an after effect, something that they had intended for a season 5 that, just kind of got tacked on at the end.
And why did the portal do what it did? Why did it reverse itself and come on and then all these, again, who were they? And, I'm looking at digitalspy.com said, what if a whole bunch of Nazis come marching through that portal? So, you could have a whole new problem. And are these just everyday civilians who got strung up in the first place? And why would they just kind of walk through they're walking through Macy's?
That's what I'm saying. There's no happy ending in this series.
No. It's like they didn't know how to end it. We've seen lots of series like that. Movies and TV shows. They didn't know how to end it. And I wonder if they rode themselves into a corner, and like Eric pointed out, they needed another season or two to come up with an ending.
It probably should have been.
They had to end it somehow.
Well, and 10 episodes, it probably needed to be 13. And I'm not usually one to say that.
Yeah.
Usually I think that most seasons of TV shows, especially streaming originals, go on way too long. But in this case, I would have liked to have seen a few more after event episodes.
Yeah.
Maybe Yeah.
I think that we needed to definitely have something definitive to say, who these people were who were coming through the portal, like it was the ending of Close Encounters. I'm not sure if the title character, the man in the high castle, I can't remember his name. Larry just mentioned it. I'm drawing a blank. Hawthorne. I think Hawthorne had said something to the extent that these are all the people who had died from our dimension, or he had said there was a throwaway line, but because of all the background noise, I don't think that I caught it. But I love the show. I genuinely love the show. It was the last 5 or 10 minutes of the show that I thought was rushed, and it was really I think that here's what it also reminds me of, and I don't know if you're old enough to remember V. I don't know if you're old enough to remember the NBC show V, where you had these alien invaders, and it was an allegory for Nazis, space Nazis. Oh no, hold on a second, I got to do this. Space Nazis,
That's great.
Who were actually lizards. I got to do this again right. If I'm going to do it right. Space alien Nazi lizards, who came and they basically took over Earth and started a Holocaust, as it were. And there were a lot of brilliant analogies between the alien invaders and Nazi Germany. And it was such an awesome premise for a mini-series. And to get the aliens to leave, they had to create this toxic red dust that was only toxic, for the Nazi space lizards. And the ending of V, and like the magic lizard girl, the magic hybrid lizard girl, was able to like grab these two controllers, and she had like this magic. It was Deus Ex Machina space lizard Nazis, and the ending of it all felt way too rushed. And it was like, it's sort of like somebody like looked at the watch and they says, "Oh my God, we only have $250,000 to end the series. Quick, we need to come on." And it just seemed contrived, as it were. And this isn't that bad, but I do think that having all those people coming through the portal and not explaining who they were, it was kind of like that. It was like it's like, what's the most clever thing we can think of, and that's ambiguous, and put it on the screen, and have the Dieselpunk podcast argue about this ad infinitum. It seemed like they were a little too clever for themselves.
I would like to see them just blow up the portal. I mean, that alone could have been useful. Somehow the portal collapses in on itself or something. I don't know. Maybe something that would imply that the real revolution started now that Germany's out of the picture, and we are, it's say something like it's just a matter of time or something, where Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're our best hope. Something like that could have ended it in a sense of, oh, well, it may be a generation, but we're going to win. Something like that. And I think that could have been a better ending, but, that was a great example, V. I try to block that out of my mind, that series.
Well, speaking of space alien Nazi lizards, that's exactly the antagonist in the sequel to Iron Sky, The Coming Race.
Yeah.
They are alien Nazi lizards. It comes all full circle back to Iron Sky.
There you go.
Doesn't it always kind of, don't we? You know what? We ought to have a bell every time somebody mentions Iron Sky. We need to ring a bell. So
I can take care of that from now on.
Do so. So now we're dancing really close to 2 hours, guys.
Well, I've said all I need to say about Man in the High Castle. I actually really loved it.
Yep.
And I did like the way that it left so many things open at the end, because I always kind of appreciate the writers leaving something for my imagination to latch onto.
Right.
It's like the ending of the setting ending of Carnival. We don't know what happened to those characters. We have to write the endings for ourselves.
Oh, sure.
And there's something in that I really appreciate, actually.
Yeah, well, that was also another case where they got canceled, thinking that they were going to have a 3rd season, and they got told, "Oh, by the way, guys, I know you've already shot the final episode, but there ain't going to be a 3rd season." HBO canceled it, pulled the rug out of the feet on that one. That's why we only have two seasons, and why it ends on this kind of a cliffhanger.
Right.
I in all honesty, I think it's the final scene in the final episode of Man in the High Castle. I think that's the only real genuine problem that I had with the entire series. I think that's the only really dark blemish on the entire. I thought everything else was simply phenomenal. And it was, I think that all those people coming through the portal in the end and leaving it ambiguous, I thought maybe it's just me. I hope I'm not just fishing for something that I'm looking for a reason to be a downer or be controversial. I just felt it was just too ambiguous, and it was frustrating. So, do we have time for anything else, or
well, let me just add one last thing. So, this past week, I discovered the magic of watching a streaming TV show with subtitles. Episode 4 of The Mandalorian, I watched it, and then I watched it again for the Rebel Force Radio podcast that I was on Friday night. And the second time we watched it with the subtitles. Mm-hmm. And you pick up so much context that you lose the first viewing. So any of you out there who have not watched Man in the High Castle yet, or you're only halfway through it, maybe watch it a second time, but with the subtitles, and see if you don't pick up far more context and far more texture than you did the first time. That's all I got to say.
That's great advice. I watch everything with subtitles now. It didn't help losing most of my hearing in my right ear. That kind of had something to do with it. But ever since then, I've been watching everything with subtitles, and I just about won't watch anything without them. Yeah. And you're right. There's a lot to Mandalorian, and there's a lot of subtlety in there that, that's really good advice, Johnny. I agree.
I think that one of the things that I am going to leave this with is that, in this, it does come full circle. I don't want to become one of those toxic fans who says, "Oh, there's too much good stuff on. I don't have enough time. Oh, I'm miserable because I'm happy. Oh, I need something to be upset about." I don't want to be that person. But here's another thing, and it's never been a better time to be a creative person. There's never been a better time in all of human history that I can think of to be a creative person. If you have an idea and you're willing to commit to buying or renting or borrowing the technology to do something, there's no better time to be an artist. There's no better time to be a music or audio producer or a filmmaker. What I would really like to see, and maybe this is a challenge to the Dieselpunk community, I would actually like to see Maybe this is going to tie into Tales from the Flip Side Part 2. I would actually like to see other people come up with their own ideas for alternate dimensions in the Decoverse. And use the inspiration or maybe the angst of the ending of Man in the High Castle and come up with their own, quote, endings, as it were. And
well, it's funny that you say that, because that is going to be the focus of Chapter 3, is, the different realities that are connected to the nexus of reality and the effects of changing the timeline and time travel and, dimension hopping. So, yep, Tales from the Decoverse, people.
Yep.
Come on board. Join the fun.
So I cannot wait to see what other people have. And the thing is that, first of all, I got to get up first thing tomorrow. I got a 12-hour shift tomorrow. And I'm going to be, and I promise you, probably into hour 6 of my shift tomorrow, I'm going to say, oh man, I should have said that instead. Oh man. So I do think that, because it's been too long since the three of us, and I miss Daisy. I really, we got to go back to doing this as a monthly thing, guys. I'm just saying.
I'm all on board.
Yep. So, anyway, Johnny, why don't you take us out?
All right. As always, thank you guys for tuning in. And if you like the show, make sure you tell 200-300 of your closest friends and family to come join the fun. And on behalf of Larry Amyett and Eric Fisk, I am John Pyka saying swing hard, swing often. We'll catch you on the flip side.
Don't forget to check out the Dieselpunk podcast and the Fedora Chronicles wherever you get your podcasts, such as Apple's iTunes, Stitcher, Player FM, and more. If you can't find the Dieselpunk podcast or the Fedora Chronicles radio show wherever you get podcasts, let us know and we'll fix that for you right away. And look for the Dieselpunk podcast and the Fedora Chronicles on social media, such as Facebook and Twitter. Find us on those platforms and tell us what you thought of our most recent episode. And if we like your comment, we'll read them on the air. This has been a co-production of the Dieselpunk podcast and the Fedora Chronicles radio show with hosts John Pyka, Larry Amyett, and myself, Eric King Fisk. Our theme song is Royal Flush by Olive Music. Copyright 2020, all rights reserved. Keep your chin up and your fedoras on, and thank you for listening.